Welcome to the Humble Hoof podcast. My name is Alicia Harlov. This is a podcast for both horse owners and hoof care professionals, offering discussions into various philosophies on the health of the hoof and soundness of your horse. Please check us out on Facebook or at thehumblehoof.com.
Trying to choose the right supplements for the right horses often feels like a chore, and you have enough chores as it is. Fortunately, there's Equithrive, whose mission is to make this whole nutrition equation easier on you and much more beneficial to your horses. Equithrive's lineup of pelleted supplements are developed with care, backed by science, and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Not to mention picky eater approved. Whether you need advanced joint care for your equine athlete, gut, or metabolic support, Equithrive is your one-stop shop for feed tub fortification. Do your horses and yourself a favor and visit equithrive.com. Use the promo code HumbleHoof and get 20% off your first order, plus free and fast shipping nationwide. Don't forget to use HumbleHoof, all one word, to get 20% off your first order at equithrive.com.
A special thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Cavallo. For our Humble Hoof listeners, they are offering 20% off their Cavallo Trek hoof boots using the coupon code HRN at checkout. The Trek is the world's most popular and versatile hoof boot and Cavallo's toughest trail boot, while also doubling as an option for therapy or rehab. The front closure system makes it easily adaptable to various hoof shapes, and the TPU upper design allows for maximum strength while minimizing weight for the comfort and ease of movement for your horse. These are recommended by vets and trainers and also loved as transport boots by barrel racers, ship jumpers, dressage riders, and everyone in between. Again, for 20% off a pair of Treks, use the code HRN at checkout at cavallo-inc.com. Running a hoof rehab facility where the majority of the hoof health comes from a proper diet, I spend a lot of time in the summer pulling hay tests and sending it off to Equi-Analytical to analyze and make sure I'm feeding the correct amount of minerals. I reached out to Equi-Analytical to see if they would chat with me about what hay testing is, why it's important, and what are some things that we can look for. They connected me with Ellington King. Ellington is a member of the NIR affiliate team, and she provides support to a rapidly expanding international network of feed and forage labs licensed to use Dairy One's near-infrared spectroscopy calibrations. This is pretty cool because it spans across 15 different countries with over 40 instruments. Equi-Analytical is a subsidiary of Dairy One, so Ellington works with customers in the dairy and equine industries. Obviously, we're going to chat a bit about the equine industry today. She did a really great job explaining some of these more complex topics with me in this episode. So one huge part of my hoof rehab facility is diet and nutrition, and I test every single batch of hay that comes in. I balance my minerals to my hay test. I just want to make sure my horses have all the nutrition they need to grow the healthiest hooves they can. And I've had so many people ask me about that I thought it'd be really great to talk to someone who has a lot more information and experience with it than even I do. So thank you so much for being willing to do this. And just to get started, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became interested in forage analysis and kind of your journey with Equi-Analytical?
Yeah. So I can give you a little bit of my equine background. So I grew up in central Kentucky, right in the middle of horse country. And I've owned horses my whole life. I grew up taking hunter jumper lessons and doing small local shows and volunteering for a hippotherapy program. And then I continued on to ride on an IEA team in high school and an IHSA team in college. And I studied animal science at Cornell University, which helped me continue to develop an interest in animal welfare and nutrition. And then right out of college, I worked at Riddle Equine Hospital's laboratory. I was doing things like blood tests and bacteria culture tests. And currently I work as a lab technical support specialist at Dairy One, and Equi-Analytical is a Dairy One enterprise, and it's really cool to be involved with the horse industry in that way. And I just enjoy working for a company that ultimately works to improve animal nutrition and welfare by providing timely and accurate feed and forage results that customers can then use to develop optimal diets for their animals, specifically horses.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, it sounds like your background is pretty impressive just in that alone. So what are the reasons that somebody would want to, test their hay or submit a sample to Equi-Analytical? What does it mean for their horse's health?
Right. So as horse owners, we all know that our main responsibility is to do whatever we can to make our horses as happy and healthy as they can be. And a huge component of this is making sure you're providing them with the proper nutrition. You can't tell what nutrients you're actually providing your horse by just looking at your hay and feed. So it's just really important to send that in to get it tested. And on the hoof health topic, like everyone is familiar with the phrase no hoof, no horse. So it's really important to see what minerals you're currently providing for hoof health and kind of go from there. In order to begin to evaluate your horse's nutrition, you have to first see what nutrients their current hay, feed, and grass is providing them with. And since hay is such a huge portion of a horse's diet, that's a great place to start. And then you can see from there what you might need to supplement. Ultimately, our services are a lot cheaper and less stressful for your horse than vet visits. So it's really, really important to test your feed so you can manage your horse's nutrition. And nutrition is one of those things that is right at our fingertips, and we can directly control that. We know that horses are really delicate animals and can have like random emergency injuries and everything like that. So it's good peace of mind to know that you're controlling what you can.
Yeah.
And then here at Dairy One, we're celebrating serving horse owners for 75 years this year. We're excited to continue to meet all of your equine and feed and forage needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, when I was starting out, when I got my first horse, I was just like kind of throwing supplements at him to kind of, you see all this marketing and you're like, oh, well, I guess that sounds good. I guess my horse needs more of this or that. And so that's why when I learned more about like what you're saying, like actually knowing what you're feeding, like if I'm feeding 20, 25 pounds of hay a day, and that's like the bulk of what my horse is getting, I want to know what's actually in that instead of just like tossing random stuff at him. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So, if somebody wants to, like, they're hearing this, they're like, oh my goodness, this is great. Like, I definitely want to test my hay. What are some tips for people who are submitting a sample for the first time?
Yeah. So submitting a sample to Equi-Analytical is an easy process. And all of the sample submission instructions are on our website, along with our printable sample submission form. And we also offer Equi-Analytical analysis kits. And these include everything that you need to submit a sample, like even the plastic sample bag to put your sample in. We want to make sure that customers know to submit their feed or forage in a quart-sized plastic bag, because submitting samples in a different sized bag could result in an additional handling fee. Another practical tip I have is just to be sure that you have some sort of tracking on your packages. Sometimes weather or just things we can't control can delay packages, and we want to be able to track them down. And to get the best results, you just need to submit your samples correctly. This is especially important if you have a horse that needs quick results.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what type of feed tests are available? Like what tests can you get through Equi-Analytical?
Yeah, so we offer hay testing, pasture testing, and feed testing. We also offer water analysis and manure analysis. We have the option to select an analysis package. We have a few different options. And then also you always have the option of creating a custom package that's more tailored to your specific needs. One kind of unique service we offer is horse treat testing. This is kind of just a fun option if any of you make homemade treats. And we know that a lot of horse owners are also pet owners. So in addition to equine and cattle feed testing, we also offer pet treat testing, just kind of a fun little option too.
Oh yeah, that's cool. And actually I've had people send in, I don't want to cause an uproar, but I've had people send in supplements that they currently feed to see if what is on the label actually matches what comes back.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't want to cause any drama with that, but that is something where, I have had people do that, which is really cool. So that's cool that you guys have that too.
Yeah.
Because the horses that come here are here for hoof rehab, I want them to grow the healthiest hoof possible, and I don't want nutrition to hinder that in any way. So when I get my hay test, now this is something that I have learned from Dr. Kellen through NRC Plus and feeding metabolic horses, but also just trying to grow the healthiest foot possible for any horse. I look at the major and minor mineral ratios. Now, this is not something from Equi-Analytical, so I just want to point that out. This isn't their views. But I look at the calcium, phosphorus, magnesium ratio, and I try to get that close to 2 to 1 to 1. And I look at the iron, copper, zinc, manganese ratio. And I want that close to 4 to 1 to 3 to 3. So if I get a hay test that comes back and there's 50 milligrams of iron per pound, and I know that I'm going to be feeding 20 pounds of hay a day, then they would be getting 1,000 milligrams a day of iron. So if I want to make my feed program balanced to where those minerals are going to be absorbed in the necessary amounts to grow a healthy foot, I would feed at least 250 milligrams of copper and 750 milligrams of zinc to balance that 1,000 milligrams of iron. I have seen incredible progress with hoof health, wall quality, lamina connection, sole depth, healthy frogs when I do this. So although there are some that tend to say, okay, we only need to feed like the very bare minimum NRC requirements, I want to make sure that I'm feeding the horse what it would need to thrive and not just survive. The positive impact I've seen on hoof health, but also their comfort and their soundness has been enough for me to continue doing it this way. And the safe upper limits are so much higher for these minerals than I would ever feed. So I have just seen only positives come from this. Something else that's really important for the horses here is for me to look at the ESC, or ethanol soluble carbs, and the starch levels. Especially for metabolic horses, I make sure that the starch levels in my hay are less than 4%, and the ESC and starch combined are less than 10%. If it is over that, then I can soak the hay to get the sugars lower, the ethanol soluble carbs lower, but you can't soak the starch out. And since starch converts 100% to glucose in the body, then I want to make sure the starch is really in a safe zone. Having a hoof rehab facility, one main focus of ours is forage. I want the horses here to have safe, tested forage available 24/7 without the risk of becoming obese. I've spent years looking for the ideal slow feeder for us, and we have found it with Hay Boss feeders. When I tell you that my Hay Boss XL feeder has cut my feeding time by 90%, I mean it, and it might even be an understatement. The covered feeders with integrated slow feed nets allow for all my horses here to have access to hay all the time, which is healthy for their guts and minds. They're also not able to completely binge all at once because the nets keep them in check. They're available all over North America right now, but side note, if you're in New England, I got mine from Mountain Lane Farm, who delivered it right to me and showed us how to set it up and use it. We can't imagine our lives without it here.
And I can get into our two main methods of analysis.
Sure.
We have near-infrared reflectance spectroscopy, NIR, and wet chemistry. NIR is a rapid, non-destructive method of analysis. This is really good for general indicators. Wet chemistry is more time-intensive, but provides a more precise result. For example, if you're interested in testing minerals, it's often recommended to utilize wet chemistry for optimal accuracy. So our hay testing is done to assess forage quality. A large portion of the diet consists of hay. A lot of times forage is at least 50% of a horse's diet. And it's extremely important to know how much of each nutrient your hay is providing. Hay testing is especially important in the winter when pasture access might be limited, so you're feeding a lot more hay. Pasture testing is important since horses obviously spend a lot of time grazing. It's important to be aware of the nutritional composition of your pasture, especially if your horses have any issues, health issues like metabolic issues. And it's really good to know that the nutritional composition of grass can change with the seasons and other environmental factors. So testing throughout the year is also really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work a lot with metabolic horses, which I know you mentioned with the hay testing. And I obviously am looking specifically at like the sugar and starch levels in the hay for that. And ECIR is a group that I follow for feeding the metabolic horse. And they recommend to get the wet chemistry test for the ESC and starch because they said it can be more accurate than the NIR. And so why is that? Like, I know that's probably a broad, weird, random question, but I'm not a very sciencey person. So like, why is wet chemistry more accurate?
So I can give you a little bit about the difference between NIR and wet chem.
Sure.
So NIR is near infrared reflectance spectroscopy, and NIR is a rapid, non-destructive method of analysis. NIR provides accurate results with a turnaround time of typically under 24 hours. And so wet chemistry is considered to be more of a traditional method of analysis and is a bit more time intensive. And so if you're looking to get, quick results, we would recommend NIR. But so NIR performs very well when testing for organic materials like protein, fiber, fats, sugar, and starch. And NIR is more of a general indicator for minerals since NIR can have more of a difficult time with inorganic materials. So if precise mineral levels are desired, wet chemistry analysis is often recommended. And we can't predict microminerals through NIR analysis, so we would recommend wet chemistry for that too. And especially for ration balancing purposes when you're looking at the mineral composition of your feed and forage. And so this is kind of why we have our EquiCheck package, and that gives you the rapid turnaround of NIR for primary nutrients combined with the wet chemistry analysis of minerals.
Awesome. And which one is that? Like, so I usually do the 601, but then sometimes I'll do like the 603 package. If I have a metabolic course and I want the wet chemistry for the ESC and starch.
Right. Yeah, so the 601 is the EquiCheck.
Okay, yeah. Perfect. Awesome. So what is the process of NIR testing? Like, how do you figure out what the nutrients are in these samples?
Yeah, so with NIR, the instrument shines infrared light on the sample, and the amount of light reflected by the sample is measured. And this can provide us information about the sample's composition. So NIR technology requires calibrations, and these calibrations are developed by correlating data from traditional wet chemistry and combining it with NIR spectra for samples used as reference. And so Dairy One has a large library of wet chemistry data matched with NIR spectra, and we use this library to develop future calibrations.
Awesome. Yeah, because I've always heard that from ECIR to, if you really want to know for sure for the sugar and starch levels, which are the most important for those metabolic cases, is to get the wet chemistry. And I actually did a test recently through Equi-Analytical where I did NIR and then I also did wet chemistry, and they came out just about the same. I mean, like less like a decimal point difference basically. Right. So I was pretty impressed with that. So I was like, okay, well, at least it's not like, oh, this is saying that the starch is 1%, but this one's saying the starch is 7%. It's not like a huge difference. But
it's normally not a large difference, and it's more important when you're working with inorganic materials. So especially with minerals, we normally recommend wet chemistry testing.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. And sorry, I kind of cut you off, but you were talking about, I didn't even realize that Equi-Analytical did the water testing and the manure testing, you said. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, so we perform water testing, and this allows you to identify which nutrients are present in your water and also what bacteria might be present. This ultimately allows you to assess your horse's water quality. One thing to note is that when you are sending in water samples, we'll need to receive it at the lab like 24 hours after collection. This is really important if you're getting nitrate testing or bacteria testing on your water.
Yeah, awesome. So with the manure testing, what are you looking for?
So we're looking to see what nutrients are not being absorbed by your horse. So you could be feeding this diet that you think is working, but really your horse is losing a lot of those nutrients. So it's helping you identify the effectiveness of your current ration.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. I had no idea. I had no idea that you guys even had that. Awesome. And is that something where like is there a link on the website to a submission, like how to do that
Yeah.
too? Okay.
Yeah, there's a submission form and collection instructions.
Awesome. So in terms of like the forage testing, because that's what I'm most familiar with, like what minerals can you test for?
Yeah. So at Equi-Analytical, we see that a lot of horse owners want to test for calcium and phosphorus, and also zinc and copper. Those are some of our main ones. And we also offer iron, magnesium, and sodium. And selenium testing is available domestically through a third-party lab. And chloride testing can always be added to an analysis too. And you can find our full list of minerals on our website.
Yeah, I know when I test, I always focus on like the major and minor minerals because that's what I'm going to be like adding to their feed plan typically. But yeah. And so I've had probably one of the biggest questions I've had people ask is how do they get the samples that send in? I have a hay core and I don't know. I was always just taught that that's the best way to do it. But how would you recommend collecting a sample?
Yeah, so a hay probe is a really good way to collect hay samples. It's really the only way to obtain a representative sample from individual bales of hay. So you'll need to core the hay to get a sample of what is actually throughout the whole bale of hay, as opposed to just pulling a few handfuls out. And oftentimes you can borrow a hay probe from your local extension office or nutritionists or vets in your area.
Awesome. And so, once you get the results, and I've always gotten mine back super fast. I've been really impressed. Once you have these results, what do you do with, like, what should an owner do with them?
Right. So once you receive results, our role is to provide you with an accurate analysis so that you can then work with a nutritionist or your vet to create a ration that works for your horse. Nutritionists will help you take into account your horse's age, breed, weight, lifestyle, level of work that they're in, any medical issues that they have, and what nutrients are provided by the grass or hay that they're currently having access to. And then if you don't have access to a nutritionist, you can also use ration balancing software yourself to formulate the diet. There are a lot of online resources for that.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. There's a few that I use. I ended up taking a course on, the NRC requirements and balancing minerals. But I feel like a lot of people get so nervous that it's going to be super difficult, or like they don't try it because it's an overwhelming idea. But really, like the one thing I want to press in this conversation is like, one, I think it's super important because I see the hooves on the horses here get incredibly, like, so much more healthy when I'm actually targeting their nutrition. But two, it's not that hard. Like, I know it seems scary, but I just ended up buying my own hay probe, but it takes me like a few minutes to go up and try to like stab as many bales as possible with my hay probe and like stick it in a quart-sized bag and mail it off.
Right.
I just like print off a form from online and send it in, and I get the results. I don't want to misspeak, but I always get my results in less than a week whenever I've sent it. And then obviously like I do have that like little bit of education on balancing, but like you said, there's so many different options for reaching out to like, one that pops to mind is like Mad Barn does like free consultations on mineral balancing, or Feed XL is a program that a lot of people use. So it doesn't have to be scary.
Yeah, it does seem daunting. We do have a lot of customers that use Feed XL, and that seems like a really helpful resource.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, thanks again so much for being willing to chat. And like, if people are if people are interested and they want to learn more, like where would they go to sort of connect with you guys and find out how to test their hay?
Yeah, so our website, equianalytical.com, has a lot of helpful resources. And on that website, we have detailed instructions for sample collection and little diagrams that can be helpful for you when collecting samples. On our website, we also offer the Penn State hay probe available for sale. If you're not able to find a hay probe that you can borrow.
Awesome. Yeah. And is it, sorry, I don't have to include this, but is it in stock? I feel like sometimes it ends up being like out of stock, but
that's a great question. Let me check.
Because I always send people there. I'm like, you get a hay probe there. And they're like, oh, it's not available. I've had people buy hay probes from elsewhere and they break like the second time they use them. So I don't know what other people are doing with hay probes they're making.
Oh, no. Yeah, it looks like it's currently available.
Okay, awesome.
For sale on our website.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much. I'm like really excited for this because I cannot tell you how many times I have people asking me about hay testing. I feel a little bit like a robot to like spew off all of the information that you just said, which is really helpful. I can just direct them to this. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for being willing to do this. This was great. And I'm happy that we can get this information out there.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Well, have a great rest of your week.
Sounds good. Thank you.
No problem. Have a nice day.
You too. Bye.
Bye. I always say that I'm slightly more hoof obsessed than the average person, and chances are, if you're listening to a hoof care podcast, you are too. So we should probably be friends. Feel free to find me on Facebook or email me at thehumblehoof@gmail.com.